Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and yet again this week the issue of the independent group, the group of MPs who were members of Labour and the Conservatives respectively and then quit those parties but are still MPs, is still causing consternation. Some people even took this to court, and the judges basically said, yeah, they could do that because you vote for the candidate and not the party. And I saw people on Twitter going mad about this, like, what? Of course we vote for the party. What's going on? And of course, this is an issue of our democracy that just many people don't understand. And recently, this has caused two particular issues. First of all, people not quite understanding why we haven't carried out the referendum yet, why there's any even debate about it in Parliament, and also why when an MP either leaves their party or is ejected from it, why that doesn't trigger a by-election for another one, because most people vote for the party. I vote for the party, but I understand what the system is. The system is simply this. You vote for a candidate. On the ballot paper, sure, when you've got your list of candidates, you've also got a list of parties they belong to as well. Perhaps that shouldn't be on, because potentially that's what caused a lot of the confusion. Because there's people, as I do myself, even though I know the name of a candidate for my party, and when you read down, what you're actually looking for is the name of the party, not the name of the candidate. But that's not how parliamentary democracy works in the UK. So the issue around referenda, of course, can only be done by properly educating people. David Cameron didn't really help there as well. But in the second case, you know, what people should do is find out more about their candidates. And in fact, if they're a supporter of a party, they can actually have a say in who that candidate is, and maybe they should exercise that right to do so. However, of course, there are swing voters who will vote for a party. Obviously, you know, it's not reasonable to expect people like that to get very involved in party politics and have a say in their candidate because they're not loyal to any particular party. They may change their vote from one election to the next. So what you really want is a different system. Aha, here we go. Proportional representation, of course, is very much in tune with party politics. The thing is, British democracy doesn't take account of party politics, or hardly takes, in terms of general elections, doesn't take account of it at all. In terms of business in Westminster, takes account of it a little bit, but not that much. It's not ingrained. In fact, the party system came in the first place to subvert democracy. You know, the idea of a party is, look, they get their shaved chimp with whatever rosette on them, and they say to them, look, here's the deal. We're going to use our full party machine to get everyone to believe that you're the very person for the job to run our country. In return, you do what we say. So the whole party system, although there are noble goals of it as well, of course, in terms of forming big groups, voting blocks in Parliament to push through important legislation. Nonetheless, it actually acts to prevent the people electing MPs from really knowing what those candidates are like. So, proportional representation. There are different means of it as well. There are different methods. So let's look at some other methods around us. Our closest neighbour, Ireland, has a form of proportional representation known as the single transferable vote system. So in that system, voters in a constituency aren't electing one MP, but several. Similar thing for MEPs, actually come to that. So the constituencies are actually larger. It's like larger blocks of them. And you vote for a number of candidates according to preference. So the candidate you most want, you put a 1 in their place and so on. And if your preferred candidate already has so many votes that they will definitely get a seat, then the spare votes go to your second choice and so on. In addition, if your preferred candidate has no chance of election, alas, poor Lord Buckethead, then your vote isn't wasted either, because then that goes to the next choice. So what that system does is it means you don't have some people whose vote goes to waste entirely, and also you still have a system where you can elect independent MPs if necessary. Now, much closer to home, in fact at home, in the devolved parliaments in Wales and Scotland, they use an additional member system. So in those elections, each voter has 2 ballot papers. One is a list of candidates. It's exactly like the first past the post system we actually have for Westminster elections. And the candidate with more votes than any others gets the position. I was going to say the most votes, though that's not true, because some of these people obviously will never get near 50% of the vote for that constituency. But then there's a second ballot paper where you have a list of parties to vote for. So in these sort of elections, the parliament is made up of two blocks of seats. One block of seat is for the first ballot, so that's just candidates, first past the post system, the stuff we have in Westminster. And then you have the second block, which is for the parties, and then those parties allocate MPs to those seats according to how many seats they've won as a share of that vote. So you would call that the weakest form of proportional representation, because it tends to, you still got a lot of first past the post about it. So you can still, and where our democracy fails quite a lot, apart from people not really understanding how it works, is with tactical voting, because you get a lot of people who will vote tactically. For example, let's say you're a Labour supporter and you're in a constituency that always sort of returns, or almost always returns, a Conservative MP. And let's say Labour are not even in second place in that constituency. Let's say the only MP who ever realistically opposes them is, say, a Liberal Democrat MP. Well, you might get some people who are more attuned with Labour voting Liberal Democrat because, well, I'd rather a Liberal Democrat MP than a Conservative MP. It's not terribly democratic, really. So if we move on to another close neighbour, the Netherlands, they use a party list proportional system. Now, there are 30 other European countries that use that system as well, so that makes it the most popular form of democracy in Europe. And this system also uses larger constituencies than we have now, because, again, you're electing multiple MPs. In these elections, you're essentially voting for parties, as millions in the UK already think they are. Parties then allocate the MPs to Parliament in proportion to their share of the vote. So, for example, if we look at the 2017 general election, the Conservatives won 42% of the popular vote, but gained 49% of the seats in Parliament. Labour won 40% of the proportional vote, so 2% behind the Conservatives, but they also got 40% of the seats. So proportionally, they got fewer seats as compared to their share of the popular vote, compared to the Conservatives. But the Conservatives had a proportional number of seats, then they'd have been on 276 seats now. Labour would be on 260 seats, and the Liberal Democrats would have 48 seats. Now that means a Labour-Liberal Democrat coalition could have more seats than the Conservatives, even with the DUP help. It would still be a minority government in that particular case, but it would be the minority government we have now, as opposed to the Conservative minority government. So these things would change the results quite markedly. In addition, if you actually had proportional representation of parties, candidates would feel less inclined to vote tactically. Or I say candidates, I mean voters, of course, because your vote isn't going to waste. Like, as I say, if you're in a constituency and you're a Labour supporter, but Labour is very much in third place and maybe even a distant third, you think, well, it's a wasted vote. Some of those voters may not even bother to go to the election. It can be a bit of a hassle. Whereas if it's a much larger constituency, that vote is probably going to get someone elected, maybe even several, so you don't feel that vote is wasted at all. So voting for the party, you're much more likely to vote for the party of your choice rather than to vote for the least bad option of the two that you think realistically will win the seat. So with the party proportional system, you just vote for the party, that's it. You vote for the party you really believe in, because there's a good chance your vote's going to be useful. But there are variations on the theme with varying pros and cons. In a closed list system, you literally just vote for the party, that's it. The party chooses the MPs. That means that the voters get no real say over their candidate unless they're heavily involved in that party. But that doesn't help swing voters, as I've said before, who don't have any involvement there, and also doesn't really allow for independent candidates in the same sort of way, because they'd have to form their own party. They couldn't just actually be independent. Even if they were a party like with a membership of one, they would have to form their own party. So again, it's another system designed to frustrate the will of Lord Buckethead, really. Now, a slight variation on that system is that the party puts forward candidates and people vote for those candidates. Their vote is still a vote for the party, But the candidates who become MPs are the ones that those people voted for, not their local party. For example, let's say the Turnip Party puts forward 10 candidates and they win enough of a share of the votes in that area to send 4 candidates to Parliament. They don't get to choose the 4, it'll be the 4 that got the most votes out of those 10. So the 4 Turnip candidates would be the MPs who won the popular votes within those votes for that party, should we say. Now that does allow for the election of an independent MP. In fact, the ballot papers for it could look exactly as they do now, with a list of candidates and a list of parties. And it could well be that independent can be still by some of those, because you'd be voting for a candidate still. But the way they'd be counted and distributed in Parliament would be very different to the way it is now. And that variation, again, would encourage more people to vote for the party that they most identify with and much fewer to vote tactically. So Parliament would be much more representative. And then there are other little variations that are a slight mix of the two. Of course, you wouldn't get an exact match in Parliament. There'd still be constituencies and local MPs, so the proportion of the popular vote would never be an exact match in the House of Commons, but it would be a lot closer. Another advantage is that it would actually fit with people's expectations for how their vote is being used. You know, is a democratic system where people don't really understand how their vote is used really all that democratic after all? So why haven't we adopted these systems, or at least one of them? Why are we stuck in the 18th century? I basically imagine it's because the only people who can change the system are the people we just elected with the current system. So to change the system would inevitably change the result of future elections, and there aren't enough MPs willing to give up their power that easily, because surely for a great many of them it would. So as such, despite the clear breakdown in the democratic process recently, which even predates the Brexit referendum, it's got nothing directly tied to that, I don't see any changes anytime soon. In fact, to be honest with you, the only way I can even imagine, and I mean imagine, a change to one of those much better systems, preferably what I would think would be should we say an open party system where you choose the candidate, but what you're really voting for is the party. That way, if an MP did change their party, the party would say, right, we've lost that seat now, we're just going to appoint someone else. Or it goes down on the list on whoever would have been next in the candidate list, I guess. But the best chance, even in my own imaginings that I can see this, is let's say we left the EU without a deal and then, rack and ruination. And so then sometime later we applied to rejoin and the EU said, well, I don't know. I mean, for a start, you're going to have to change that system of government you've got there to make it fit for the 21st century. Maybe in a situation like that, but I don't really see internally us doing this. What always strikes me as the most baffling, actually, is that Labour governments don't do it. I mean, sure, they face the same issues in terms of a bit less of a lack of control. All governments, Labour governments included, in fact, Labour and Conservative leaderships, even when they're out of government, are huge control freaks. That's what the party system encourages. Any of these systems removes a little bit of their control. Obviously, I suppose what they prefer really is a closed party system, where the party leadership chooses the candidates based on how many MPs they get. But then we get no choice over those candidates. But yeah, it's really odd that Labour don't do it, because although, yes, they've just been elected under that old system, and yes, many of those MPs won't really relish the idea of giving up that power, just for the future, it's going to get Labour into power more often. Always baffle me that they don't do it. But I just think it's the same thing. I mean, it is the control freakery of all Labour leaderships. That's why you never hear it being talked about in the manifesto. The Liberal Democrats do. Of course, they're much more in favour of it because, of course, they never actually win power, or at least not in their own right. So it would definitely favour them, as I already alluded to. If we'd have had proportional representation, then in the last general election, even though they took a bit of a hammering, they'd still have 3 or 4 times as many MPs as they currently do. In fact, I think it's more than 4 times as many MPs as they currently do. So anyway, those are the potential options, not that we've actually got anything to choose from as such, that would fit what the public expect of a democratic process, where we'd get a lot less consternation when strange things happen. Let me know what you think in the comments below, particularly, of course, if you're Not in the UK, in which case you almost certainly, well, in Europe at any rate, use one of these systems. Let me know how you think it goes. And if you've enjoyed the video, don't forget to click the like button, subscribe for further content, and click the bell notification as well. Until next time, I'll see you later.